Welcome to the Introduction to and the Basics of Cross-Country Skiing, presented by New Mexico Cross Country Ski Club. This is the basics course, and we will cover the very basics of equipment and skis in this class. There will be another on the snow instruction course as well. So this course will cover a series of topics. First is being fit and adapting to altitude, clothing choices we can make, the basics of ski equipment, taking food and water with you, having safety equipment and what to pack as you ski, and rentals, and a brief introduction to the on the snow session. So start off with altitude and fitness. We have a quote here. The more fit you are, the more fun you'll have. So I always try and get prepared before the season by doing some fitness exercises. One is one-legged squats. Another is to strengthen my arms with pull-ups and push-ups, or whatever you might deem appropriate to strengthen your use of poles. And a big one, which surprisingly is balance. There's a lot of balance control as you learn to ski. And there's two links here that you can follow. They're not our clubs, but they're to some yoga exercises. So altitude, thing to think about there is we have a responsibility to ourselves and our traveling companions to know and self-monitor to keep everyone safe. Since we are in a very hostile environment, certainly not summer type of hiking, we need to be aware of any safety issues coming up. And that's including our own body all the way to knowing avalanche safety. So let's talk about the altitude adaptation a little bit. Peter Hackett, who had a research station on Mount McKinley for many years, wrote a book about it, and a favorite quote out of that I have is, acute mountain sickness is better prevented than treated. So if you're coming from low altitude and skiing to very high altitude, you might have some issues and you should be aware of them. So some of the ways that he suggests preventing them are listed below. Two of them are in gray, the three others are highlighted. And the reason they're in gray is for longer trips, you need to keep track of that. But if we do take trips, then we focus mostly on the highlighted three. So that one is prevention of dehydration. Just bring plenty of water. As a matter of fact, when I see him at Mount McKinley once, he says that was the biggest factor, is just making sure you're well hydrated. Overexertion is the next one. Take it easy as you go up there until you're fully adapted, and also eat a high carbohydrate diet. All those he has factored seeing help people adapt on high altitudes. So what are the most common symptoms of altitude sickness? The first one is often just a headache. Next one is gastrointestinal problems. Third is pulmonary breathing problems and ataxia, which is the most severe case, where you start losing coordination. And a lot of times that is associated with the first stages of hypothermia. On to the next topic of clothing. Be prepared, the old Scout motto. So the goal of wearing clothes is to be comfortable in conditions we expect to encounter and the exertion levels we are expected. So we can see we can go from spring-like skiing where it's sunny and warm to some of the deepest, coldest days of summer or winter we may want to be out. And it can be extremely cold. And we want to be able to know when to pack what kind of clothes. So how do we do the planning? Well, a lot of sources. The first one is probably the easiest, is just have local TV and radio weather forecast. Another one, which gets us more into the mountain areas, is the second one, is the Nordic Ski Club resources. We'll have a little tour of the Ski Club website later in this presentation. Another one, if you want to go directly to it, is mountainforecast.com, and we'll talk about that in a second. The SnowTel indicators as well, and then thirdly, for a forecast of snow. Okay, so this is an example of planning using the mountain forecast. Of course, you'll have to get the location right. I don't have a video presentation for that, but if you'll get the right part of the country and White Mountain, it'll actually give you a temperature forecast right on top of the mountain. And this one is done for the Sandia on December 4th of 2020. And there's a couple of interesting things to point to here. On the top scale is the temperature expected for that day. And you can see it runs for several days. We can plan out there. And I like this little graphic here where they show the altitude on the mountain and where the freeze line is. So we can see down here early in the morning that the freeze line is below the summit, but around 7,000 feet or so. And we can see as the several days go on, we can see it actually be warmer than the height of the mountain. So it's going to be a warm day, it's forecasting. Okay, another site to visit is a SnowTel map, and I forgot to point out that these links in here are clickable if you get the PDF downloaded as well. If not, you can just search for SnowTel. And it's a little awkward to use because it's really more for monitoring for weather people, even climatologists. But what it is, you can go to a map and it'll show different the SnowTel locations. And here I'm showing just above Santa Fe, and then the one at the top of the Santa Fe ski lift. Now, if you click on that, it'll give you the name of it and some details about it. So, for example, this is above 11,000 feet, and I click the parameter to show is 5 inches of snow shown here, so we can get a gauge of how thick the snow is. Okay, clothing. So there's 5 ways to lose heat while skiing, or anytime really. And we want to balance all 5 of these so we remain comfortable. We don't want to be too hot or too cold. And they are the respiration, just evaporation, radiation, convection, and conduction. All those come into play. So how do we balance all those things? We try and balance them by selecting the right kind of clothing and layering, mostly layering. We've all heard of that probably. The first rule about being in the winter condition is no cotton. The reason is the cotton will retain the moisture and become wet. And if it becomes wet clothing, we may lose our insulation. So if we get in a condition where it could be very cold, we could lose our insulation and be at risk. So how do we usually design our clothing structure? Well, as I was saying earlier, we do layered, and we'll talk about this in a moment, about a base layer, mid layer, and then an outer layer. Some other things that's nice to have about your clothing is to be able to vent them or to remove them and put them in your pack, because as the day goes on it may warm up and you may want to strip off clothes, put it in your pack, and we want to be convenient to do that. So we want to talk about the upper body, hands, feet, whatever, you know, the whole thing. Okay, so what should we bring? Well, the reality is probably what you already got. So we would recommend starting with your cold weather hiking gear or athletic gear that you might already have, and think about this laying system: a base layer, mid layer, and outer layer. So what is the layering? Let's talk about that. So the base layer is generally the layer that's closest to your skin, and we want it to be very wicking. So if you sweat into it, it wicks it away pretty well and gets it away from your body. Typical fabrics are merino wool or some kind of synthetic blend. And personally, I like the synthetics because they tend to dry quicker and they're much more easy to wash and keep clean. The mid layer usually functions as the real insulating layer. So that's often some kind of fleece jackets or a down vest, something that actually has quite a bit of volume to it. And then the outer layer is, it turns out to be one of the most sophisticated layers. And you often think this is just a raincoat or something, but it turns out that it oftentimes you'll spend the most money on this layer because you're asking it to do a lot of things like being waterproof, water resistant. You want it to be snow repelling, breathable. You have lots of ventilation openings in them and a lot of zippers. So that could be the most sophisticated layer. And of course that applies to all your clothing, whether it be your lower body, your gloves, your hat, your socks. Okay, a little bit of odds and ends with the clothing, and that is I'm showing some of these zip pits. You haven't ever seen them, but you can unzip them right under your armpits and ventilate a lot of air through them. Also, having some fully unzippable clothes so you can fully open it while you're moving, and even an advantage in skiing is having a zip it from both ends that can meet in the middle. And the reason that I prefer some clothing like that is if you're skiing, you're moving your arm, and if you have your garment fully open, it'll start interfering with your pulling action. Whereas if you have it zip from the bottom and the top, you can pretty well vent and it won't interfere with your arm motion. Now, final note to also to keep you warm is these portable toe and hand warmers, and you can just carry these in your pack, and if you get too cold you can actually slip them in your glove or mitten and break it open, and it supplies about 6 or 7 hours of heat. Same thing can be done with your shoes. Now that one takes a little bit more care in having a heater in your shoe because it needs air to keep the chemical reaction going and keep your feet warm. On to the real meat of the subject is the skis, the poles, and the boots. And to quote the Wizard of Oz, oh my, there's a lot of variability in what you want here. And I've just listed some of these here, like the types of skis you want, what characteristics these skis should have, and what do you want them to do, like for racing, backcountry, whatever. The bindings that'll go in your skis, again, that'll be determined by what you want to do, and so forth and so on. Some important thing to realize: if you go rent them, you're actually just going to get what the shop has, and that'll most likely be light touring skis. Now, I've also included a couple links at the bottom of this page for extra instruction if you want to dig deeper than what's in this presentation. And a lot of really excellent writing has been done by our former club members, and you can just click on the club site and go to this link and it'll explain a lot. There's another one that was put out by REI. I hope the link works in future years, but it gives another good explanation. But for here, we'll go ahead and go through the basics of it somewhat. Okay, so ski types. Basically, it's form follows function. So whatever you want to do, you're going to get the skis that'll do that. And the lightest, quickest types are these Nordic or cross-country skis. Mostly those will be used in prepared tracks. Ski touring, a little bit more unmaintained trails and even quite a bit of off-trail. And then getting more remote, you can get into backcountry skis where you will pursue very difficult, unprepared terrains, and you'll be facing whatever is out there. And a lot of times you want to go up very steep hills and down very steep hills. So there's a lot more to that. And then finally, the most kind of the heavy duty stuff is the telemark skiing. So generally, the harsher the conditions are, the larger and heavier your gear is. And again, I've included these two links in here so you can go read more about them. So let's talk about the kind of classic or skate skis. These are obviously prepared for tracks in a very controlled situation. A lot of times they're prepared by snowmobiles dragging various things behind it to make beautiful tracks. The characteristics of these things are they're very light, they're very narrow to fit in the tracks, and very fast. They can take surprising amount of abuse, but they're made to just go all about speed. And that includes these poles as well, become specialized. Here I'm showing some skate skis. You can see how narrow they are. The short tips are turned up and very specialized handles to the poles. The next class is, we need to talk about boots and bindings. And they also follow the functional form that you want. Here I'm showing some skate ski bindings. You can see they're very light. They obviously can handle a lot of stress because these are top athletes usually who do it. And but they're made for very specialized track activities. And then we get into light touring where they're a little bit wider, a little bit heavier boot. You can see now these things reach up the ankle a little bit more. They're still not very beefy boots. They have different kinds of bindings, and I won't go into that here because there's so many. And you can see there's a little bit more added insulation, so you're not just keeping not depending on your activity level to keep you warm. The shoe will help you keep warm a little bit. And you can see that in these bindings also they have ridges on the bottoms of the binding, so your shoe will, when you set your shoe down into that, it'll firmly grip the or control the ski very nicely. Okay, the next type is ski touring. Again, this is to get in and out of track, go into a little bit more wilder places. This is an example of a 3-pin binding where you just have 3 holes in the boot. It sticks in these 3 pins, and then you snap this plate over it to bind it strongly to the ski. And again, looking at the boot, now we can see it's become a harder plastic boot, and it extends up quite a bit up the way of the ankle, so you can apply a lot more torque to the skis, more demanding conditions, and has a lot of padding up the ankle. Now these skis are also used for climbing and descending, so they typically have longer fish scales underneath, so you don't get as much glide out of them, but you go up steeper hills. And we'll talk about ascending really steep hills in a moment here. And then the last class is telemark skis, and here you can see you can, and this is an example of having a cable binding where you snap the cable into the boot, and the boot often can be latched to the ski to make it a harder connection, or you don't have to use that feature, but often is. And again, looking at the boot, you can see this is almost like a downhill boot now. It goes way up the ankle. It's all very hard and rigid plastic and has snap-in closure to the boot. Then the final topic, if you want to go up really steep and demanding climbs, you can attach skins to the bottom of your skis. And there's kind of 2 groupings of that. And I'm showing the skin the full length, so you can latch it to the top of the ski, has a light adhesive, and you can just go down the full length of the ski and the skins will stick to the bottom of the ski. Well, what is a skin? Well, it's actually kind of like a fur, a one-directional fur. We have all these kind of hair or fibers pointing, and you point them in the back direction. And so when the things are pointing uphill, you don't slide back because the snow binds against the direction of the fibers. And when you turn around and start going the other direction, they'll slide a lot easier. So it's a very aggressive type of skiing condition. And since they're removable, you can keep them in your pack until you need them. And then when you get to the top of the hill, want to ski down with quite a bit of speed, you can just take them, roll them up, fold them up, however you do it, put them in your pack, and descend on a very quick ski. On to the top of what to put in your pack. Well, that really depends on where you're going to go. If you're going to be skiing at a ski resort with prepared trails versus going to backcountry where you're going to spend the night out someplace. It all depends on what you plan to do, and that means form follows function. If you're at a ski resort, it's going to be light. If you're going to go to backcountry type of stuff, it's going to be more. But the basics often are just having a little bit of food and water, or a lot, depending on what you need, some extra clothes to keep you warm, some other skiing related items, we'll go into that, some navigation, because you don't want to get lost in the middle of winter when the days are short and be out there on the skis and not know how to get back to safety. Of course, the last item is some safety and emergency items. Okay, let's talk about the food and water in a little bit more detail. It's good to remember that skiing is a very high energy sport, and you're going to have to prepare for having a lot of energy. One of the trade-offs that you're going to make is forward motion versus staying warm, and you want to have enough energy to do both. If you run out of food, you might have to make a choice of trying to stay warm or making forward motion, and that can be a very uncomfortable situation to be in. So I often carry at least some energy bars, and of course you have water as well, to full-on lunches or dinners or whatever you want. But the point is, try and not run out of food. Water is not just important to keep yourself hydrated, but it is also an altitude acclimatization item. So again, you'll be at high altitude, you'll be breathing in very cold air, which is dry, warming up in your lungs, and exhaust very humid air. Of course, that's why you see your breath in cold air. And that is losing quite a bit of water, deceptively amount of water during the day when you're not even sweating. So how do you carry it? Well, a lot of people are now taking hydration packs or some kind of container. If you do a hydration pack, you usually have a little hose, and the thing you got to remember about that hose, if you drink out of it, is that can freeze in that cold weather. And the best way to prevent that is after you take a drink, you hold the biter valve in the hose above your head and let it drain completely back into the bladder. That way you'll never have a frozen hose. So extra ski items and some safety items. Up in the upper left corner, you'll see some things that I like to carry, and most skiers do. Being in New Mexico, we often run into very warm weather, and when the snow is warm, it can start sticking and freezing to your skis, and all of a sudden your skis become long snowshoes. So having some kind of glide wax, here I'm showing some Maxi Wax, another one by Swix, that you can put on there, put on your skis to help it slide quite a bit in warm conditions. I also actually always carry a little candle with me. And that is because if I forget these other items and run into some warm weather, I got that candle always with me. And I also include a scraper, a cork, so if I want to smooth out that wax, mostly for the candle wax, I can rub that down real quickly too and get better glides and performance out of it. It's quite a bit of art to waxing, even for fish scale skis. Another item not to forget is sunscreen and sunshades. You could be out there in very bright, high altitude sunshine, and all that sunlight will be reflecting off the snow. And a lot of it will be high ultraviolet, so you can actually not only be comfortable, but you can have some kind of snow blindness. So it's always good to treat your eyes and your skin very well. So safety items. A couple items. One is probably what most of us own anyway, is some kind of cell phone. Surprisingly, if we go up in the Sandias, you got really pretty good coverage of cell phone in the Sandias. Now, if you ever had an emergency, they will direct you to start texting as opposed to sending voice. You may make contact through voice, but end up texting to save your battery. Your battery will be out in cold weather and probably won't have as long a life in the cold weather. But there's a whole section on that. If you ever do get to take avalanche training, they'll tell you a lot about it. I also carry some kind of satellite-based beacon, so I can communicate outside of cell phone reception areas. So this will communicate directly to a satellite and go to whomever you want to send it to. There's a lot of products about that. I'm showing just an inReach. It's what I happen to have, but there's the Spot, and I think there's several others there. So let's talk about the resources that you can find on the New Mexico Cross Country Ski Club website. Here I've just typed in the address up here, and this is what you'll see up in the upper left corner. And you can see it's announcing our ski club and has several topics down here to choose from. Now the one that I'm going to focus on in this presentation is instruction, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the other resources as well. So let's go look at that. So once you're on the page, this is how you get to the instruction. You'll just click on this down arrow and it'll bring down a submenu, and we actually have several layers of instruction. The first one, which is this presentation is part of, is the beginner cross-country ski instruction. We also have some intermediate lessons. Once you get the basics down, you can step it up, become a better skier. We have telemark instruction. Once you get really good and want to really polish your skills up, you can take this course and start working on telemark skiing, the very unique type of skiing downhill which you'll need in deep powder. Also backcountry skills and some photos to go along with it. So let's go look at this beginner cross-country ski instruction. So if you click on that, it'll take you to this page. There's several things I've highlighted here. One is we've also made some videos on the snow videos, and you can click on this, it'll take you down the page and you can click on those videos. But don't necessarily just click and go to it, because there's a lot of great material between the top of this page and the videos. Matter of fact, this is where most of this material has come from, is just taking it from this and adding it to a PowerPoint presentation. And then the third thing I'd point out is here, there's a lot of good topics to explore to the right sidebar. Okay, so let's actually look at the light slide bar a little bit here. Again, this is kind of the submenu that we've already gone through, so you can jump from item to item without having to go all the way back to the home page. You can just click on that. And there's a lot of good documentation about that we've just talked about here. You can click on those documents. And then finally, REI has carefully put together a backcountry checklist. So when you get to thinking about doing backcountry stuff, you can click on there and make sure you have at least the essential items for backcountry. It is also good to look through it, just be familiar with it to decide if you need to take it in less than backcountry conditions. Another part of the tour of this website is the XC, CB, and AT ski resources. There's a lot of good material under that, so that's what we will go look to next. Now in the upper left corner, I've captured the upper image of that the web page when you click on that link, and there's a lot of great stuff to read through here. But since this is the basics of cross-country skiing, I'll leave that to the person interested in perusing the website. But I also want to put highlight some of the things that the ski club does as group activities that you may be interested in sometime. The first one is doing hut trips and yurts, and those are specific places that's kind of out in the woods to very much out in the woods, but it's a place that you don't have to set up a tent. It's often warm and kind of a cheap hotel room, but it's very, very nice to have a place to sleep. So you're going to be sleeping out in the wilderness areas someplace. And there's a host of those trips and some great leaders that lead these things that are very experienced in them. Also is to look at the Nordic organizations that are around the state and out of state. And again, if you want to expand your horizons a little bit, you can look at these other organizations, see what they do that may be different than what we do, and participate in some of their activities too. Now another item here is the avalanche schools, and that is a critical one when you begin to get out of controlled ski areas. Either get off the Sandias and go into the high backcountry of the Pecos or Jemez or wherever you might go. It's really important to know about avalanches. And everybody that seems to go on these hut trips or yurt trips have gone through this avalanche school. And having done it myself, it is very good and very educational. And hopefully it'll scare you about avalanches, because that's what will keep you safe. And then there's a host of other links you can follow and pursue on here. So these people that put this together has put a lot of effort into this website. Okay, this last topic here is a fairly hard one to figure out unless you have somebody to help you out. That is where to ski. New Mexico is a great place, but where do I actually go? How do I find good trails? And luckily, we have Sam Baird in our group who has put together a specific book about touring in northern New Mexico. And if you have a chance, I would say buy this book. He sells them pretty cheap. It's kind of out of date, but the trails don't change much. And it's great, it has great ideas. You can look it up. It has ratings of trails and how long and where to go to and maps and a whole bunch of stuff. If you want to pursue it on your own, get that book. And Sam is still in our club, and he leads lots of tours still. So if you want to learn about it from not only his book, but from the author himself, sign up for one of his trips and ask lots of questions, because I'm sure he would love to tell you about a lot of places to ski. Okay, so what's on our website? We also have quite a bit of stuff on the website, and I've just shown a little bit here. And this is on the left here is some trails that are in the Jemez area. And what we see here is kind of an estimate of how long these trails can be, the name of these trails, and the classification of these things. And what does the classification mean? Well, we've actually given ratings on these things, and you can find them on the website. But they're from beginner to expert kind of ratings. For example, the first rating is usually less than 1,000 feet of climb and less than 5 miles. And so forth and so on, and they step up in harder and harder ratings. So when you see a trip posted by our club, they'll give a rating, and you can decide, am I a 1, am I a 2, am I a 3, and you can guess where to go and not go, and look at the people who's leading it. And if you have questions about it, you can shoot them an email and find out more about it and decide if you want to participate in that or not. We have lots of class 1 trails in the Jemez, and it's a beautiful place to go. I find those trails in the Jemez far more interesting than I ever would have believed. Okay, so if you want to get these two documents here, I've also included the links here. You can get them on the Jemez Ski Trail and get these ratings and the whole list, and also the ratings chart up here. Okay, so where are we going to go if we go skiing in the Sandias? Now I've just included a map of the Sandias here. This is a forest map, and actually I would recommend you getting it. And actually you can get these maps from the Forest Service through these links. You can print them out and take them with you. It's a good thing not to get lost. And this, of course, is just an overview map of it coming out of Albuquerque on the bottom of the map or to the west, going around Tierras Canyon at the right side and making your way up all the way up to the crest. So I'm going to show that a little bit more detail. The detail part will be just these trails around the crest area. So you can see the road that goes up here will be shown in the map and some of these trails. We're going to look for the 10K trail and Ellis Trailhead. So let's go look at that map. This is a blow up of the crest area. First of all, notice that where the direction north is. Typically you put it at the top of the map, but I wanted to get as much of this map on here so you can look at it. So I've kind of turned it sideways, but you can see that this is the crest trail. This red thing goes all the way up to the top. And I've labeled several highlight points here. One is, of course, the crest up here. Another one is this Ellis Trailhead. That seems to be a very popular place for a lot of club members. And then the 10K trailhead. And of course, if you want to, you can take the tram up and avoid all the driving just in case the roads are inclement or something. And you can ski directly away from the ski area or the upper tram terminal. Of course, this does connect to the east with the downhill ski area, but we would be skiing along these roads parallel to the ridge line of the Sandias. Okay, so which trails are interesting to us? Well, luckily they've marked and highlighted and seems to have a lot of activity in these trails, and our club members tend to like parking at the Ellis Trailhead or the crest or take the tram up. And the easiest trail probably is the service road that they take from the crest over to the tram terminal. In the winter, that is a well-maintained, generally a maintained ski path. There's another club that actually grooms it for racing, and so there's usually a very good track put in there. And for the most part, it's not challenging until you get right close to the tram. And the reason it's even challenging there is because the track is very fast. So parallel to that, you can also see this Rocky Point trail, which goes up and down through the woods. It's really fun. I like that. Another one that travels above the service road is this gravel pit, which is very fun to take. And that one could take you up to the Kiwanis Meadow. And if you've been up there, you see the Kiwanis cabin, but it's basically a very big open area with modest slope to it. So if you want to go practice some of your turns and downhill techniques, a lot of people go up there and ski up and down in the meadow. Of course, during the summer, you need to keep off of it, but in the winter, you're just skiing on snow. Some of the other ones that are close to the crest are also the switchback trails. You can go long ways back in and out. You can put in a lot of miles on these trails just being local to that area. Now, if you want to be a little bit more adventurous and the trail being more challenging, you can take these trails that go north. Now, I haven't shown them here except for where they meet the road. This is the 10K trail and the Ellis Trail. And then there's another one that goes on the top of the crest beyond the radio towers. and they all go to a lookout point several miles away. So if you want to go do those, explore them, be prepared to make some distance on those trails. You can ski 4 or 5 miles to that point and come back. And there'll be a lot more rugged terrain than all these. So as you advance, you might want to explore those. Now these are also snowshoe and hiker tracks, so they're not going to be nearly as taken care of as some of these others. Okay, some other places to ski. One of my other favorite places, the Valles Calderas. And it's often, if you've been up there, you can see it's just a big flat area. You can go in there and just ski more than you ever dream. And one of the reasons I like it is just a beautiful scenic place to ski. There are also some trails that go to the edges, like go to the South Mountain Trail, and you can get some elevation change and some roads and more challenging ski terrain. So there's a lot of variety up there. And also keeping in that area, there's a lot of trails in the Jemez area. One of the things I like about the Jemez is it's actually pretty easy to get to. Usually the roads are kept pretty clear, the snow is pretty good, a lot of the trails that have been established are on the western and northern exposure of hills, so they can be skied on deep into the spring. They range from beginner to advanced, depending on the kind of conditions and the trails you take. Some of the challenging, a couple of them, and I'm highlighting here, these are trip reports that people have put out. You can see the path that they took. They had some kind of GPS monitor, and you can see the elevation change and a description about it. And these will be updated as people take trips, so you can read what the current conditions is. But some of them that are very popular is the Ladera, Los Griegos, the Coyote Call are shown here. And those are really good, fun places to go. And if you go with the group, they'll teach you all sorts of stuff about how to deal with terrain that's off the beaten path. Now, Sam often leads a lot of these trails, a lot of these trips into these trails area. And during the off season, he actually has he himself and a group of people go up there and cut trees to keep the trails open. So in some ways, he's kind of my hero, or the club's hero, because he does so much work and all his volunteers do this work. So we really appreciate that. Again, if Sam offers a trip up there, sign up for it. Great guy to go with, as all of our leaders are. Okay, so let's guess that this is maybe your first time to skiing. Where can I rent equipment? Well, we've listed some resources. Some of them are shown on the right in one of our newsletter publications. You can rent them all over the state, as well as here in Albuquerque. If you happen to be a member of the military, you can get on Sandia Base. You can go to the Kirtland Air Force Base Rental Center, and they have a variety of stuff, and they say that their cross-country ski equipment is lightly used, so there's a good chance that you'll be able to get some rentals from there. Along the same vein in Albuquerque, there's Sport Systems that rent them. They're just on Montgomery Boulevard in Louisiana. And this year being 2020, they've actually beefed up both their skis that they're selling and their rental department. They're anticipating a big run on cross-country skiing this year. Another one that may be available after the new year is the UNM Outdoor Rental and Resources. Now, of course, they rent to all sorts of sports, but they also have cross-country ski for rent there, and another place here in Santa Fe. So you might want to look over this list and decide and call around and see what kind of deals you can get. Okay, so a little bit of advertising about what the club does. Now that you got a place, you got some lessons behind you, you got an ideas of places you might go. we can look at what the club actually does. So if you go to, again, the web page and click on ski outings, and it'll list all these things. And we have a lot of spontaneous day trips. During normal years, we have bus trips to go into Colorado to more exotic places where you stay 2 or 3 nights in a hotel and you just ski to your content. And there's a variety of trails to choose from, and a lot of times if you're a beginner skier, there'll be an instructor for you there too if you want to make that your first trip. So a lot of these things are about having fun with people as well as skiing. And they even have some sections on like a dream trip. They seem to do trips to Yellowstone pretty often. Okay, so the last thing is on the snow classes. Now, as I pointed out earlier, we actually have made some on the snow videos. And since we're 2020 COVID lockdown, I actually made these videos in my living room. And I explain pretty well what we go through in the instruction class. So you can get a really good idea about what is there by going to that YouTube channel and looking at that list. Now, if you have the slides, you can actually, to this presentation, you can actually click on this and it'll take you to a playlist. And again, as I pointed out, you can go to the website and under instruction and click on videos and it'll take you there as well. So when is this class going to happen? Well, tentatively we're saying January 9th. Now this depends on what the COVID restrictions are, but I think we have some instructors and we'll have some ways to sign up for this if you're really interested, and we'll give you enough time to rent your equipment, become a little bit familiar with it, and then we'll meet. And most likely we'll meet up on the Sandia and at the Ellis trailhead that I pointed out earlier in this presentation. But if you have any questions to it, you can send an email to instruction@nmccskiclub.org. You need to let us know if you're going to come by just clicking on that. You have to be a member. This is for a members thing only. And you can send us saying, I'm going to show up on the 9th. And right now we have an instructor plus 4 students as a group that we're allowed to have. And so if we have more students than 4, we can add more instructors. And we're currently setting up the meetup group to help us out with that. Also, we're going to just do it manually, so we'll do both of these. But the most important thing is to send an email to instruction and tell us that you're interested in. And this is the last slide of the presentation. If you want to get in contact to us, there's a couple ways of doing it. One is, like I was just saying earlier, is send it to instruction at New Mexico Cross Country Ski Club.org, or you can just say support at the same website, and somebody will get back to you pretty quickly. Now again, links are, if you have this presentation, you can get that on the snow playlist. And if you want to join the club, you can click on club members and click on that, go to that website and sign up. If you have any questions about the material I've covered or about the club, you can send us emails about that and we'll get back to you.